Welcome back to Worldview. Laila Jazayeri is director of the Association of Anglo-Iranian Women in the UK and an affiliate of the National Council for Resistance in Iran. Now, she works with the Women's Committee of NCRI, and I've gotten to know her as a powerful and passionate spokeswoman for the refugees in Camp Liberty, who used to be housed in Camp Ashraf just outside of Baghdad. Laila Jazayeri, it's a pleasure to welcome you to Worldview.
Thank you very much for having me, Denis.
It's been a very busy weekend. Now, Iran, I'll use air quotes here, elected a new president. And Politico magazine has an op-ed this morning by Michael Shank and Wayne Gilchrist. In it, they suggest that this new moderate president, Hassan Rouhani's victory, is good for diplomacy, especially with the selection of Samantha Power as the UN ambassador. Now, I'm going to guess that the Women's Committee is going to have a much different view of this.
Well, yes, this wasn't a proper election. We're not talking about democracy. This was a sham election, a masquerade. They caught him as being moderate. He has been involved right from the beginning of the, after the revolution, when Khomeini, Ayatollah, came to power. He's been involved in the highest level of all sorts of positions and the highest level of positions in the regime. He's been the secretary of the Supreme National Security Council and the representative of Khamenei, supreme religious leader at this council, and basically involved all the crimes committed by this regime. No, he's not a moderate, of course. I mean, it's just maybe using few words to show, to the world that perhaps, he looks moderate, just like what Khatami did 15 years ago. Nothing will change. We believe if he is really moderate, that is what he should do. He should first and foremost open the doors of the prisons in Iran. Let all the political prisoners out. We need to have the freedom of media, freedom of parties, freedom of assembly, and, remove the suppression and repression dominated in Iran. Secondly, they must stop chasing a nuclear bomb if they are really moderate. So stop this aggressive nuclear plan. Third, stop interfering in Syria. Stop supporting Assad. Start supporting Hezbollah. Stop expanding terrorism and fundamentalism outside Iranian borders. And these three are kind of pillars of the Iranian regime, and the regime cannot back off from them. At the end of the day, no matter how they describe this new so-called president, at the end of the day, under the constitution of the Iranian regime, the supreme religious leader, Khamenei, has the final say. And the major decisions, the major decisions are taken by him. And he's not going to back off from these three elements. So there would be no change, no. And we believe, actually, what needs to be done is for the West to basically correct this counterproductive policy of appeasement towards the regime. For many years, this policy of rapprochement towards the regime, this should end, really. And the West should embrace the aspirations of Iranian people for democratic regime change in Iran.
Now, Laila, the White House had an interesting response to all of this. I'm going to read from a quote from the press secretary's office. Now, this is unusual because we don't hear anything from President Obama on this subject, nor do we hear from Jay Carney, his press secretary, rather this innocuous statement. It says, we've seen the announcement by the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran that Hassan Rouhani has been declared the winner of Iran's presidential election. We respect the vote of the Iranian people and congratulate them for their participation in the political process. Yet in the very next sentence, they say yesterday's election took place against the backdrop of a lack of transparency, censorship of the media, internet and text messages, and an intimidating security environment that limit the freedom of expression and assembly. It's our hope that the Iranian government will heed the will of the Iranian people and make a responsible choice for the future of all Iranians. And then they even go on in this statement to talk about the nuclear program. It seems an awful lot of stretching around to try to get to the point. How do you feel about this?
Well, interestingly, there is contradiction within his statement, and he himself admits that there was a lack of transparency and censorship of media. That shows, again, this wasn't a real election. This wasn't a democracy. And basically, the West is kind of hesitant in their approach. This policy of wait and see. I heard the Foreign Office here, their position also the same. They want to just wait and see what happens. But we know for the fact that no change would happen because, a dragon would not give birth to a dove. They are all dragons. And the only way forward is democratic regime change. None of these people basically could bring about any changes because, as I said again, the final say is by Khamenei, the supreme religious leader, and he's not going to back off from the major policies of the regime, internally and internationally.
We're speaking with Laila Jazayeri of the Association of Anglo-Iranian Women in the UK on Worldview with Denis Campbell. Now, Laila, for the second time, the residents of Camp Liberty, who used to be in Camp Ashraf, experienced a very, very devastating rocket attack. Some 40 rockets were launched and several people were injured and killed. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there and what happened this past weekend and how are the camp residents today?
This was a cowardly reaction by the regime in response to this election crisis, to their sham elections, to terrorize people inside Iran, to stop any uprising, also to hide this crisis that is engulfing the entirety of this regime from the eyes of the international community. Yes, they attacked again by under the eyes of Nouri al-Maliki, the Iraqi prime minister. These were by the Quds force. These were Quds force of the Iranian regime, and it has already resulted in 2 deaths, more than 70 wounded, injured. This is the responsibility. The protection of these people is the responsibility of the United Nations and UNAMI and its head in Iraq, Martin Kubler. We have paved the way for this bloodshed because Martin Kubler promised by relocating these people from their original home in Camp Ashraf to Liberty, they would be protected. There would be no attack because they were attacked when they were in Camp Ashraf. But this is the second time. The first time also in 9th of February, there was another terrorist attack, 8 dead, more than 200 injured. Now this is the second one. And enough is enough. UNAMI is siding with the Iraqi government in the Iranian regime. The Kubler should do its job. He's paid to do a job, a good job, to look after the refugees, not siding with the Iranian regime. He has promised to protect them. He hasn't delivered.
What would it take to protect the people of Camp Liberty? Are you asking for the UN to relocate them back to Camp Ashraf?
Well, we know that after 18 months, nothing has happened. None of these people have been able to go to resettle in third world countries. Only less than 0.5% have managed to get out of Iraq. So it's a joke, to wait until you go through the process and resettle. What needs to be done? The issue of their protection is the prime issue, and they must be returned back to Ashraf immediately, because in Ashraf is 80 times bigger than Liberty, and there are better facilities for their protection. Right now there is no protection. Even after the first attack, Martin Kubler didn't do anything to get some protection for these people in Liberty. He could have helped them to get their helmets, their vest, their military vest, to help them to get their medical facilities over from Camp Ashraf, or to make sure that they could build up some barriers just to protect themselves. He did nothing, and they are there with no protection. Going back to Ashraf, there is some measures there which would protect them from further attacks. This is what needs to be done, and Kubler should be tried actually in a court of law for crime against humanity.
Well, this is an issue that will continue for some time, as it has for a number of years up until this point. I want to thank you for joining us, Laila, and I do appreciate you taking the time to join us.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you, Denis.
We've been speaking with Laila Jazayeri of the Association of Anglo-Iranian Women in the United Kingdom on Worldview with Denis Campbell. Thank you for watching. Stay right here.